Hello, everybody. It's George from Ireland, and make sure you comment as we're going along. Subscribe on Patreon, donate to PayPal, georgecallahan7@gmail.com. So this is about the late and unlamented Mr. Charles Kirk, who was murdered, was it Thursday? And connected mostly with people in their teens, early 20s. In fact, it was a teenager who told me about him a few months ago. I hadn't even heard about him until July, I think. But I know he had a very loyal fan base. But alas and alack, he is no more. And no, I do not think that his murder was remotely justifiable. I've said whoever killed him ought to get a life sentence. I didn't want the least act of violence to be inflicted upon him, despite his vociferation for the mass murder of tens of thousands of civilians in Gaza. So he was not a nice guy at all. He was absolutely vicious. But I'm looking more into him, and despite him being a so-called staunch defender of Israel, the only thing he disliked about Israel was the Jews. And you see all these crackpot anti-Semitic theories he was pumping out, all these tropes which go back to the protocols of the elders of Zion about this worldwide Jewish conspiracy. I'm not sure he used the actual phrase, and so on. So wow. And that's the thing about some of the white nationalists, Christian fundamentalists like him. They say, well, the Bible says that this is the land of the Jews and so on, but they just don't like Jewish people. Partly because Jewish people in the United States tend towards the Democrats, and then he's a MAGA Republican. Also, what was he saying? That he dislikes the way Jewish donors have been making benefactions to liberal quarters. George Soros, for example. Even worse, Soros is a Hungarian immigrant, an American citizen now, but that doesn't count. It's only a piece of paper and all this thing. He doesn't like, non-Europeans moving into Europe. How about non-Americans moving into America? Should Kirk have deported himself back to the British Isles, and judging by his surname, more particularly that's Scotland? And so on. That he doesn't like Jewish people donating to education institutions. Oh yeah, really bad. Helping education, helping people who couldn't otherwise afford it pursue third level education. People actually achieve their aspirations. What generosity is bad. I mean, the odd thing is the flip side of that is the other anti-Semitic trope is claiming that Jewish people are tight-fisted. They're too generous and they're too mean at the same time. They just can't win, really, can they? And that they're disseminating cultural Marxist ideas. And it's true that there are Jewish Marxists, and Karl Marx was ethnically Jewish, though raised in Christianity. His grandfather was the chief rabbi of Trier. I think I'm correct in saying that's why there was that, Jewish-owned department store in the UK, Marks and Sparks, M&S, Marks and Spencer rather, but they spelled it MRKS, not with the X. So this is like neo-Nazism to say, well, Karl Marx was ethnically Jewish, so all Jewish people are bad. It really is revolting. Um, and then he says that these same universities promote anti-Semitism. Bit of projection. He promotes anti-Semitism. No. Saying Palestinians are human is not anti-Semitic, but he was too much of an ignoramus to realize that Arabs are Semites. If you believe the Bible, which he claimed to, then Shem was the ancestor of both Ishmael and Isaac, and the Arabs are meant to be Ishmaelites. So as Arabs outnumber Jews at least 20-1, anti-Semitism is usually an anti-Arab thing, and he had lots of viciously anti-Arab thing to say. So he was the one who was the real anti-Semite, that their lives didn't count, that he approved of every single atrocity. He never ever criticized what they did. Do I have Jewish mates? Yes, I do. Okay, I've been to lots of synagogues, things like that. And then he says the Jews control colleges. Wow. Non-profits, movies, Hollywood. I know there are quite a few Jewish directors, and so on. But this idea that there's some sort of Jewish conspiracy, I mean, that is National Socialism, 1.0. And so it goes on. So yeah, he did his anti-Semitic impression of a stereotypical Jew at when he was at a demonstration at Cooper Union, and so on. Wow. So he's all into his stereotypes. I suppose because he was just so cognitively limited, he had to resort to stereotypes all the time. But he says that he's not anti-Semitic. He only denounces anti-Semitism in as much as he hates Arabs. Anti-Semitism against Arabs, he's all in favor of that. and Jewish people donating to the Democratic Party, almost so they didn't have the same rights as Gentiles, and so on. So, cultural Marxism. Now, Marxism really is an ideology, and I'm very much an anti-Marxist. I know quite a bit about Marxism. Never got the impression he did. I never heard him quote Marx at all, and things like that. So that was just a general boo word for him. Other things is really wanting to take the role of women back to the 1950s, or maybe even further, and so women, young women, not to pursue a career. Obviously, young women should do what they want. I mean, who's he to tell them what to do? They get married, they don't get married, they have children, they don't have children, and we have to have more babies. Well, at 31, he had a very modest two children. Some states he could have got married at 16. In all states in the United States, he could have wed aged 18. So, of legal breeding for 13 years, two children, I suggest that brace of kids was very modest. He wasn't carrying his load. He could certainly afford more children. And no, he wasn't wasting his time with something so stupid as education. He was far too clever to need education. And there he was, so conceited, not accepting that education means that you absorb certain information and you hone your cognitive functions, which he could really do with achieving. But I've got to hand it to him. Despite being uneducated, he was not a bad debater, and he was combative and would often go into the lion's den and so on. Should I post on the Lords and Assisted Dying? I might do at some point. And so forth. Okay, so women should get married early. I mean, I don't care whether they do or not. I don't preach to them about this and of your career ambitions. But you can get married and pursue a career. He didn't seem to have considered that one. And I hope his wife didn't work at all, and that single women are more depressed, suicidal, anxious, and lonely. And that's true. But I mean, that's true of single men as well. And there's the body clock ticking. Okay, it's more difficult to have children. That's true. But I realize that fertility treatments are so good. Women are sometimes able to have children well into their 50s these days. And he said that feminism has always been about tearing men down. I mean, with third wave feminism, some of that's true. But with first wave feminism, it's definitely not. I mean, you go back to the 18th century, he ought to have read A Vindication of the Rights of Woman and so forth. Well, when women had almost no legal rights anywhere. Man and his wife were one flesh. She couldn't own property separately. There were no well-paid jobs for women. There was no access to tertiary education, and men would get away with wife beating and stuff like that. Women were treated as chattel. That's not about tearing men down. So why did he find parity so threatening? Equality. What was he afraid of? Well, I suppose because he was just so inadequate. So I really don't miss him. And I said that women in their 30s are not in their prime, and I suppose that is the cruel truth, that yes, there is erotic capital, and that peaks for women at the end of their teens and their early 20s. And if they're wanting a rich guy, he's going to be much older. By the time a woman is at the peak of her career in her 50s, she would not be considered as attractive by most men. But okay, it's just not just about physical looks, and people are not completely superficial and things like that. And it said that women shouldn't be on birth control, makes them depressed, worried, increases the risk of suicide, and so forth. I mean, is there any scientific data to prove that true? I wonder why all this stuff is licensed, if that was true. So, I mean, he really was just talking nonsense. Goodness. So he was very bad news, and the way he's against BLM didn't seem to consider police murdering unarmed black people to be a problem whatsoever. I wonder why it would be a problem if it happened to only whites, particularly conservative white males. This is beyond the pale. Okay. Anyway, thank you for your comments. And so make sure you subscribe. Charlie Kirk. Okay. Feel sorry for his widow. But Charlie Kirk, he couldn't have hoped to go a better way. He died doing what he loved. And he'll be a martyr to his movement because of that. He'll be remembered long after others who live for many more decades. If he just faded away and died in his 80s and 90s, he wouldn't have made as much such a splash as he did now. Another thing is, he demanded public executions. Wow, how barbaric. He wanted to turn the United States into a Christian version of Saudi Arabia with public executions. Well, he actually was one of those public executions. The crowd saw it. Now, all right, he hadn't been found guilty of any crime. So far as I know, he didn't commit a crime. Advocacy for genocide is one. He wasn't on trial. You're in America. We aren't all lost. I mean, I know. I could solve most of America's problems with two words. Copy Canada. All right. It's like a USA that's refound its sanity in terms of publicly funded healthcare and higher education, sensible gun laws. American Canadians still have gun rights, but they balance that with everybody else's right to life. So, and not that I'm like a loony liberal and I despise Kamala Harris. Okay, thank you for watching my channel, everybody. Toodaloo.